if we've never met before, my name is Vanilla. I make videos about Pokemon. Is there anything else I should say? Nope. So you were probably drawn in by my title or my thumbnail, or maybe both, which means I did part of my job. That would be luring you into my trap, just in case you were curious. But now that I've got you here, you might want me to get straight to the point, and I respect that. So I'll give you a rundown of what I'll be talking about. There was a version of Pokemon Gold and Silver that was released in 1997. And for those of you who have big brain disease, you're probably thinking,
Gold and Silver wasn't released until 1999.
And that's true. There was a demo release of Gen 2 back in 1997, and a copy of the demo was leaked in 2018. Pokemon fans love getting a hold of stuff that they're not supposed to have. But videos covering the demo tend to look solely at how the game plays in comparison to its final release and the Pokemon designs that were never used. In my opinion, that's a relatively simple thing to do. There's an entire wiki on the cutting room floor that documents every single difference between the final release and the demo. It's a very thorough resource, and it's obvious that a lot of effort went into making it as comprehensive as it is. It's good to use as a reference, but unlike some videos I took a glimpse at while researching, I don't want to just paraphrase someone else's work. I used a lot of different sources for my research, and I do not have enough space to put them all down below, but you will be able to access them from the paste bin in the description. I want to add something different to the discussion. I think due to a language barrier, there has been almost no talk of the actual event where the Gold and Silver demo was released. Everyone just knows Space World 97 as the event where the demo was showcased. So while I will be touching on the demo and the differences between the final release, I want to really make sure I talk about what role Space World 97 has in the history of Pokemon. Now, you may be thinking that's boring. Well, I've really got nothing to say to that. Maybe to you it's boring, but I love history, so I think it's pretty cool. And if you're cool like me, and you like the style of this video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel. I kind of want to talk about how I came about making this video since I like to yap. You'll find that out real quick if you haven't already. I said it before in my Pokemon Pinball video, which you should totally check out. I have a major case of ADHD, so while it's important, coherently mapping out my thought process is pretty difficult. I don't have the cutesy social media version of ADHD either. I've got the it's hard to remember literally anything and sit still and do stuff kind of ADHD. So keep that image in mind and then combine it with my affinity for caffeine, my general demeanor can be something like this. Despite my perpetual internal struggle to pay attention, I like to spend my time reading. I was looking through old Famimaga 64 magazines from the 90s, cause that's how I like to spend my time. I know, I'm such an exciting creature. Now you may say,
Vanilla, this is supposed to be a video about Pokemon, not a magazine.
Listen, I'm the driver of this bus and I don't have a license. We're gonna talk about magazines and you're gonna like it. Famimaga 64 was a Japanese magazine that covered everything related to Nintendo games and consoles, which means they had lots of articles about Pokemon. Not to get too much into the history of a magazine because I do want to keep this as Pokemon-centric as I can, but Famimaga 64 was an offshoot of another magazine by the name of Family Computer Magazine. Family Computer Magazine was published from 1985 until 1998. It was originally a monthly publication, but then moved to a bi-weekly model later on. Their news, game rankings, and tips and tricks were almost solely related to Nintendo and their products. Famimaga 64 was Family Computer Magazine's desperate attempt to save their company since they were losing ground to the similarly named Famitsu magazine. Famitsu was quickly becoming a lot more popular since it covered more than just Nintendo products. They still covered only Nintendo products in Famimaga 64, and given how the company ceased publication for both magazines 2 years after the inception of Famimaga 64, I would say that they never really recovered. There's a lot of cool stuff in these magazines. Well, at least it's cool to me. If you don't think it's cool, I highly doubt you're still here. The first reference that I saw of Space World 97, the event where the Gold and Silver demo had its debut, was in this little thing down at the bottom of issue 26 of Famimaga 64. This is a sweepstakes to win a Mew that was to be distributed at Space World. You would send in a postcard that indicated the name of whoever was entering the sweepstakes and which date of the event you would want to pick up your Mew. If you were one of 100,000 people to win, you would receive a Pokedex from Professor Oak in the mail a little less than 2 weeks before the event, letting you know that you won. I don't entirely know what the Pokedex is referring to, since I couldn't find any pictures. If I had to guess, it was probably just a postcard that had a Pokedex design. The 100,000 entries weren't just coming from Famimaga 64 readers. There was also another magazine by the name of Koro Koro that had the same sweepstakes going on at the time. You can see in Korokoro, there's a bullet point that explains there is a new futuristic machine you will be able to use in order to receive Mew at Space World. In the Space World 97 guidebook, there were even instructions on what to do in order to pick up your Mew if you were selected to win. They make note that winners should listen to event staff, and if you've ever been to a large convention, you know that listening isn't a convention goer's strongest skill. Let's get this out of the way now. When I show you images of this guidebook, you are not allowed to complain, okay? I mean, you can totally do that if you want, but it's not my fault they look this way. I've done my best to make the photos look presentable, but the images are taken on someone's phone while they're holding the book open on the floor. The only other place that this book exists, as far as I'm aware, is for $380 on Mercari, Japan. And for reasons I don't even need to explain, that's not happening. So somewhat blurry photos with fingers on the side is what we've got to work with. So let's get into talking about the event where this guidebook was distributed. Originally, Nintendo Space World was called Shoshinkai, or Famicom Space World, and was rebranded in 1997. Bet you weren't expecting that! Space World was a convention where Nintendo and other associated third parties would show off their up-and-coming hardware and software. There aren't many images, if any, of the event that I could find, but I did stumble across this video from 64 Mario Stadium, which was a TV program that specialized in Nintendo news that ran in the 90s. I found one upload of an episode that has a lot of footage from the event, if you can make it out. We're lucky we have any records at all, but this footage looks like it was a video of a VHS recording taken on a camcorder from the 90s. Even though I wasn't able to find a lot of pictures of Space World, I did find a blog post that was titled Space World 97 Report. I'm not sure who wrote this. The homepage of the website didn't give me much information. It says, "Welcome to Inagaki's homepage." So I'm gonna assume their name is Inagaki. The other links are to HTML templates, but there is one that shows off a car, which is pretty neat. I know nothing about cars, so cool car, I guess. I have to admit that the formatting of this website made it difficult for me to read, but I think it's someone's alleged first-hand account of what their experience was like at the event. So I think it's a cool thing for us to look at. Inagaki starts us off with an interview of what it was like walking into the Space World venue. They write, "The first thing I noticed when I arrived at the venue was that it was an event completely centered around Nintendo. I think that this is meant to be more like this event was the embodiment of Nintendo. Obviously the event is Nintendo's Space World, but it truly was a big deal because this event was where Nintendo was able to show off their newest products, even those in pre-production. Space World 97 is where Nintendo showed off peripheral add-ons for their consoles. This is the event where the Game Boy camera and the 64DD were showcased. The Game Boy camera is pretty self-explanatory. You can take pictures with it and trade them between Game Boy colors. The 64DD, or the 64 megabyte dynamic drive, is something that's a bit more obscure. It was a disk drive add-on for the Nintendo 64, and it was a bit controversial. The price was considered too high and ran off of a subscription model where you would get access to a RadNet internet service as well. It was displayed at Space World, and we can see it here being used in the guidebook. You can see the concept for Mario Artist was for you to be able to edit photos using your N64. Maybe I should stop paying Adobe and go buy a 64DD. Actually, on second thought, I take that back. I can't believe that this is in 5 carts. Who is buying this? Now, Space World gives us a glimpse into the state of video games and the market at the time. We can see here in the Space World guidebook that Nintendo's president Yamauchi Hiroshi had a speech scheduled for the first day of the event where he was going to talk about the outlook of the entertainment market. Inagaki actually gives their account of what Yamauchi discussed in his speech. Yamauchi believed that the entertainment market, which included the video game market, was losing momentum, and if things did not change, that the market would crash. He believed that companies were allowing a lot of useless and uninteresting software to be published, which had caused a flood of new but poor quality games. Useless and uninteresting aren't necessarily meant to be insults, I don't think, even though when I put it that way it sounds kind of rude. In this case, I think it's meant to mean unoriginal. Yamauchi believed that Nintendo could set themselves apart and maintain dominance and favorability in the eyes of the consumer by releasing things consumers wanted to actually buy. Nintendo intended to do that by examining who their target audience was. The target audience wasn't just in Japan. In order to keep growing as a company, Yamauchi believed that Nintendo would have to expand their market abroad. If that didn't happen, he believed the domestic market in Japan would be in jeopardy. In order to address this issue, Yamauchi brought up the good old US of A. Apparently at this time, Nintendo wanted to release Pokemon in the United States, but as Yamauchi explained, the game needed to be revised to fit the taste of Americans before it was released. This is why blue and red were released internationally instead of green and red. Even then, the international releases of blue and red are different and contain various improvements of the original Japanese red and green versions. But that's something for a totally different video, and not totally one that I'm going to be making soon or anything. Inagaki's account of Yamauchi's speech gives us insight into what kind of challenges Nintendo is facing at the time, and we can see through Yamauchi's reliance on Pokemon, that's the franchise they were hoping was going to give them the success that they needed. That's why I really wanted to talk about the events surrounding Space World, and not just the demos themselves. Because Gold and Silver were the next generation of a series that Nintendo was hoping would bring them great success. Unfortunately, that success was a bit delayed. Instead of being released in 1998 as intended, Gold and Silver was delayed until November of 1999. On Nintendo's website from 1997 and 1998, we can see the pages for the games. Besides the titles for the games being different, with the 1997 page having the title Pocket Monsters 2, we can see that the release date and the price are also changed. You can see here on the 1997 version, the date for release is around the end of 1997. And then this website says mid-March 1998. And neither of those happened. Oh, but this one says June 1999. No, wrong. Try the 21st of November. Finally. Took them a few tries, but hey, no one's perfect. And if we look at the price difference between this one from 1998 and the final website, it says that the price was going to be 3,500 yen plus tax, but it ended up being 3,800 plus tax. What a ripoff. And for my fellow Americans, that's 13.5 Big Macs. Anything to avoid the metric system, am I right? This is where we can start to see the true differences in features starting to show. There was allegedly going to be a skateboard in addition to a bicycle. How cool would that have been? But then the final version of the website got rid of the skateboard and replaced the list of features. Now it's highlighting new maps, new story, new Pokemon. I guess it's more visually appealing and concise than the original design, but I miss my skateboard. Much to my displeasure, the skateboard was probably one of the most minute changes that was made between the demo concept and the final release of Gold and Silver. This is really odd. In the Space World 97 guidebook, we can see here that Gold and Silver is marked as 80% complete. It was intended to be released only around 4 months after the convention. I think this would have been especially confusing if you had been following the game closely at the time, because if you see 80% complete, you're probably not thinking of a 2-year delay. So what happened? Why did it take so long for Gold and Silver to be launched? We can get some context for this if we take a look at some interviews that Nintendo's president Iwata Satoru did with Nintendo's current president Ishihara Tsunekazu, as well as one of the lead developers of the Pokemon franchise, Morimoto Shigeki. Morimoto concedes that there were only around 4 programmers on the development team for Gold and Silver, and a lot of delays were due to the amount of features that the group wanted to put into the game. And at the time Gold and Silver were being developed, Nintendo was producing side games like Pokemon Stadium as well. Pokemon Stadium was being shown off alongside Gold and Silver, and the Space World Guidebook boasts that the game was going to be compatible with the 64DD. I'm gonna spoil it for you, Stadium never released as a 64DD title, and its release date was also pushed back until April of 1999. And according to Iwata, there were a lot of complexities surrounding the localization on the N64 title. This means that a good chunk of resources were being spent trying to figure out how to translate the relatively primitive code of red and green to the N64, which, accompanied by a demand for compatibility with the 64DD, might explain its extensive delay for release. I think this answers some of the questions regarding what kinds of struggles the company faced during development, but as you'll soon see, there are a bunch of differences between the 97 demo and the final release. And in my opinion, a lot of these differences can't be solely explained by a small team on a time crunch. Before I go into comparing the demo and the final release, there are a lot of videos out there that talk about the differences. I'm only going to be talking about the changes that I think really showcase the change in direction the game took, so I won't be discussing every little thing, like unused audio, or every single move or item difference. But let's take a look at the Gold demo. What would it have been like to play this at the event? What would you have noticed first? There's this cute minigame that you could play where Pikachu would chase after music notes that Jigglypuff left behind, and you would be able to collect them. Nothing happens if you get all the notes, but it's a really fun feature. The opening animation is also unique to the demo, and honestly, I think it looks better than the final release, but I'm not a true Gold and Silver fanatic. I'm sure there are some of you who really like those games, and might have something to say about that. The title screen provides us 2 options, play and change settings. When we hit play, Professor Oak greets us and invites us into the world of Pokemon, much like the final release. You enter the game and you're unable to name your character, and you're assigned one of a few random names. This is understandable since you wouldn't want players hogging the demo during the event. To further expedite the player's experience, you are randomly given a level 8 starter. You may have Chikorita, but You may have also obtained one of 2 scrap starters. I don't think they were ever given official names in English, so they're called Honoguma and Kurusu in Japanese. If you know anything about the demo, this is probably one of the first things that comes to mind. There were a lot of Pokemon that were coded into the game with full front and back sprites, movesets, stats, and evolutions, but were never used. This includes the 2 starters that have completed evolutionary lines. Why they were scrapped still evades me. Some designs are cursed, like Gurotesu and Animon, but others like Ring are adorable. It's a shame they never made it into the game. However, some of these Pokemon may have been at a disadvantage if they were fully implemented in the demo. Let's use Ring as an example. Ring is a dark type, which normally wouldn't be anything to make note of, but the typing tables in the demo are very different. I'll put up an amazing type chart that was made by someone who is super awesome and cool. As you can see, dark types are now weak to normal types. Finally! My favorite type is powerful! But dark types didn't have it the worst. Steel types, called metal types in this version, are very perplexing. A bunch of types do 1x damage to them, but they're also unable to damage each other. Like what? And types like water and electric are super effective against them. I wouldn't be putting a metal type on my team anytime soon with these matchups. Moving back to the gameplay, when we enter our bedroom, you can see that it's a completely different layout. I'm not going to sit here and explain how, but you can take a look at the side-by-side. I personally think the demo is more cozy, but hey, that's just me. When you walk outside, you'll see that the starting town called Silent Hill has a completely different layout than New Bark Town. Here, there's a Pokemon Center to the north, and the Professor's Lab is to the south. Since there's pretty much no story present, you're not able to enter the lab. If you enter the Pokemon Center, you're not able to heal your Pokemon, and this is done on purpose to keep the user from playing too long. You're given 5 Pokeballs to catch Pokemon, but if you black out by fainting all your Pokemon, it will boot you back to the main menu. You're unable to evolve most Pokemon, including your starters, and obviously you're not able to save your game. You're only able to explore the 2 routes to the west of the town and fight some trainers along the way. This is rather interesting because there's pretty much an entire map that had been programmed into the demo. Now, how do we have access to information like this? If you're not able to get to these places by playing, how would you even know about them? Well, there's a version that has a debug menu. By going to the start screen and then pressing select, a menu pops up. Here we're met with quite a few options that show us different things we can look at. The first one says fight, and it's a battle simulator. You're able to pick which Pokemon you'd like on your team and what level you'd like them to be. If you pick Dex Entry 252 or 253, it will crash the game. So if you want to be edgy and break the game, that's one way you can do it. You're able to simulate fights against an opponent where you're able to choose Wild Monster or Dealer, which is a trainer. You're able to choose what Pokemon and their level as well. There's an option to view the Pokedex, and this is probably the best way to see the Pokemon that were left out from the demo. There aren't any Dex entries, but you are able to see all 251 Pokemon's front and back sprites. There's another tab called Subgames, and these are mini-games. There are slots, like you might expect, but there are also games like Picross or 15 Puzzle. I'm happy that the puzzle game never made it in, because it frustrated me to a point where I just gave up. I couldn't figure it out. The controls were clunky and not intuitive at all. As you can see, I just kept going in circles while banging my head on a wall. Picross has a few different pictures to complete, and it's here that I learned I'm not the biggest fan of Picross. But I think it's well executed with manageable controls, unlike 15 Puzzle. There's a way to get into the main game with access to the debug menu. In order to do this, you need to select the field option. This will initiate the shrinking animation, and you'll be thrown into the game. Oak doesn't give his intro, and you're just plopped into your room. You activate the in-game debug menu by pressing B and start, and there are a ton of pages with a bunch of different options. I think one of the most notable features is warp. This allows us to teleport to any of the places on the list, like Kanto and North. There's some interactive objects in some of these maps, like you can go into buildings, but a lot of them are incomplete, and in some you're even able to walk through walls. Sometimes you can't enter the grass to encounter wild Pokemon, and other times there are fields that just consist of the number 9, which is rather unsettling. There are additional locations you're able to enter if you change some of the hex codes, but I couldn't figure out how to get that to work. If you were to do this, you'd be able to travel to locations like Mount Fuji and abandoned mines. This is a map of what the entire region looks like according to the in-game data. You can see it's pretty much complete, which makes it even more perplexing why so much had to change for the final release. The in-game debug menu also allows us to use the skateboard that I missed so much, but it doesn't work properly unless you hold down the B button, and even then you're able to go through walls and stuff. Plus, you only move at walking speed. We can also see options that would help test certain features. There's a follow option, where we follow around some katakana characters and jump around a bit. Or there's the option to change the day-night cycle to be every 60 seconds. Isn't that an enjoyable thing to watch? No, didn't think so. There are a lot of other options to choose from, and a ton that you can't see unless you edit the hex code, which, again, I wasn't able to figure out. But I think that these features that I talked about are some of the more notable ones, but I'm not making an entire video about the debug menu. Now, if you've seen my videos before, you know that I like ROM hacks, and surprisingly, there is a hack that expands upon the demo, and it's described as what Pokemon Gold could have been. It's called Pokemon Super Gold 97. I'm only going to give this a quick look over since I don't want to put a full hack review in this video. But in the first hours of gameplay, I can already see that this hack has some of the best documentation I've seen so far. There's a guide that has over 400 pages. It's designed to be in the same style as the old Prima guidebooks. A lot of effort went into it, and it shows. It has entries for each area, and the different things you can do. The appendices have everything you could possibly think of. A move index, type index, as well as a list of every item in the game and where you can find it. Sorry, sometimes I get stuck on documentation. You're probably wondering how the hack plays. Since there's not really much evidence of any canon story elements from the demo as far as I'm aware, the story for this hack is original. I think it's well written, and it really feels like it could be from a real Pokemon game. Or at least it does to me in my untrained eye. It was really surreal walking through different parts of the map and thinking that this is what Gold and Silver was planned to be. The Nihon region is really well designed. It's named Nihon because the running theory is that Johto is based off of the Kansai region in Japan. So naming the region Nihon is essentially calling it Japan region. I enjoyed traveling through Nihon. Being able to encounter the Pokemon that were scrapped was really fun. They didn't feel out of place, and they felt like they were right where they should be. Super Gold takes advantage of many of the systems that were implemented in Gen 2, like berry and apricorn bushes, as well as day and night specific encounters. For example, in Silent Hills, there's an NPC named Sunny who will give you a magnet if it's Sunday. Keep in mind these features weren't implemented in the demo, so these ideas were created during the development of the hack. They also added in a new post-game map that is completely unique to the hack. The Poke community post states that there is an improved level curve compared to Final Gold, and levels are generally higher. This is intended to make the game a bit more difficult, but not impossible. I don't really mind a difficulty curve. I actually played a fun difficulty hack for my last video. But part of me wishes that some of these hacks could be a bit more generous to those of us who don't really want to challenge ourselves too much. I suppose that sounds a bit whiny, but while I have the ability to complete the game as it is, I kind of wish I would be able to enjoy it without needing a large time commitment. There's no mention of the XP curve specifically being adjusted, and I did have to spend a fair bit of time trying to level myself up for Faulkner. And over the course of a playthrough, those fair bits of time can really start to add up. I did have to run back and forth to the Pokemon Center after some battles, but as per usual, my struggle could just be that I don't know how to get the most out of the team I chose. This is what I like to call a skill issue. But there are lots of Pokemon to choose from, and it's really nice because you are able to obtain all 251 Pokemon in one save file. Similarly, evolutions have been tweaked. There's an item called the Covenant Orb that allows you to evolve Pokemon that would typically require trading. There are also new items that match the demo, like Heartstones and Poison Stones. This is just a very general summary of the hack. Maybe I'll do a video one day that's dedicated to this hack on its own, but I think this is a great option if you're looking to explore what Gen 2 could have been like. I would totally recommend you check it out if you get the chance. So I think that's about it. How did you enjoy random Pokemon history? I think it was super fun to give some context behind the demos, and if you liked it as well, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to my channel. I might also stream the gameplay that I'll use on my next video over on Twitch, so if you'd like to be a part of that and come hang out, I've left a link to my channel in the description below. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. Have an amazing day. I hope to see you again next time. Okay, bye!
Game